looks like we have a number of questions here this morning, about 26 so far. So I'm going to move into the questions. Looks like we're good on time. I'm only 2 minutes behind schedule, so that's great. So I'll start with the first question. My question is regarding the new legislation. We are an 80-unit condo complex, and our rules and regulations have had a long-standing requirement regarding any window coverings that can be seen from the exterior of a unit. So draperies, blinds, curtains, or other window coverings in each unit, and on all windows or doors must be maintained at all times. The portion of the window covering visible from the outside of the unit must be white. No reflective materials like aluminum foil, etc., can be placed on the exterior of any windows, which is visible from the outside of the unit. So the question is, one of our owners has complained that the HOA cannot regulate window coverings as a result of the new legislation, as they are an interior decoration per the new bill. HOA disagrees, as window coverings can be seen from the outside of the unit and as such would still be subject to this clause. Can you provide your thoughts on this matter? Okay, so obviously this is you're in a condo, and so we're going to go back and look at the law that pertains to condo improvements that could disturb other owners. I just don't think this falls under that at all. So if you want to do an improvement to a unit that could disturb neighbors, we can't prohibit it, is kind of what the gist of that is, but we can make the owner purchase, install, and pay for anything to minimize the disturbance. I'm not seeing the window coverings falling under this, and so I think you're well within your rights to continue to enforce that provision in your documents. Okay, next question. From one of my favorite former board members. Thanks for still being here. When a board of directors discusses things back and forth among themselves on email, is that considered an illegal meeting? So short answer on that would be yes, that probably is a violation of the open meeting law. Anytime you have a quorum of board present discussing association business, it needs to be an open board meeting. Okay, question number 3. In the past, we've limited spending from the reserve account to capital improvement projects, such as infrastructure components listed in our reserve study. A fellow board member wants to know if it's acceptable to pay for legal fees from the reserve account. So I guess the short answer on this would be you really should not be doing this. I know in some circumstances when the association doesn't have enough money, sometimes they will borrow from the reserve and then pay the reserve back for the amount that they borrow. However, that's not recommended, and you definitely should talk to your CPA if you would ever want to do that. Okay, question 4. Can HOAs conduct an escrow review on homes that are for sale? Not to stop the sale, but to inform current homeowners and future homeowners of violations. So yes, this is probably already happening at your association. So we have a law called the disclosure law. We have a cheat sheet on this topic that's called transfer fees versus disclosure fees that I would recommend you take a look at. You can find that on our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. So short answer is, if you're an association that has 50 or more lots or units, the association should be providing a disclosure statement. As part of that disclosure statement, a lot of information is provided about the association to the buyer. And one of the factors on this is the association's records. Are you aware of any violations on the lot? And you would be disclosing it as part of the disclosure statement. So yes, so you should be, you can charge. You can charge for a disclosure fee. Most associations are in fact taking the step of double checking to see if there are any violations by doing a visual inspection. Some are only going by what's in the file, but we recommend, best practices would be have somebody go out and take a look at the property, because it's a great time to catch any violations that might be in existence and notify the buyer of them. Okay, next question. Number 5, I am a board member of a 1,000-unit HOA. What is typical for working with our community manager? Are they the gatekeeper for communication with our vendors? Is it strange for us to talk directly to vendors? So really, it just depends. I have some large master plan communities where I talk directly to the board. Other large master plan communities where the manager is primarily my contact. The bottom line is you as a board make that policy. You decide what works best for your community, and then your management company and your vendors support you in whatever your decision is. Number 6, our association's office is only open 3.5 days a week and refers all financial questions to our attorney, who they also have attend every open meeting. Why can't our board or office just give us answers? It is kind of unusual, honestly, that the attorney is handling the financial questions and also attends every board meeting. I mean, that's not something that our firm does. If we were needed to, of course we would. And over the years, over the past 25 years, I can think of, maybe 10 associations where I went to their board meeting, a few times in that year. But if you're having your attorney at every board meeting, that's really expensive and that's probably unnecessary. Now, if you're going through a tough time, maybe there's a period of time that the attorney comes, but it's not every month. And so that's odd, I would say. And also that they be the gatekeeper for all the questions. I think that's a little bit odd too, but I don't really know what's going on in your community. Maybe there's litigation pending or, I don't know. So it's hard for me to comment on it, but I can just share with you my experience, which I did. Okay, next question, 7. Do rules and regulations trump the CC&Rs? No. The order of priority of the documents is the plat, then the CC&Rs, then the articles of incorporation, then the bylaws, then the rules. So they definitely do not trump, the rules definitely do not trump the CC&Rs. Okay, next question, number 8. Our HOA has no secretary currently. Is that legal? It really depends on what your documents state, but it's not ideal. Let's put it like that. Usually the secretary isn't even really doing that much anymore because the management company kind of handles a lot of the paperwork for the association, creating the minutes and maintaining the records. So is it legal? I'm assuming that your bylaws state that you have to have a secretary, so you probably are not in compliance with your bylaws. What you might want to consider doing if you can't find somebody to serve as the secretary, maybe make it an add-on to another officer role. Sometimes you'll see the secretary treasurer is the same person, or the vice president secretary is the same person. But this is something that I probably would fix and try to get somebody to step in because, like I said, nowadays it's really not that big of a role because the management company handles a lot of the responsibilities of the secretary. Okay, question number 9. We adopted a CC&R amendment or CC&Rs at an annual meeting, but an amended CC&R wasn't written up. Are the CC&Rs enforceable? So it sounds like you voted on potential changes to your CC&Rs, but you never actually wrote them up and reported them. So those would not be enforceable. What I would recommend is you go back and do the paperwork to get the votes, get ballots out there and whatever your requirements are to amend, and then record the documents once you get the requisite votes. Question number 10. Can you talk about things in a meeting that were not on the agenda distributed ahead of the time? So this is a really good question. Sometimes things come up the day of the meeting or the day before, and that, under the new law, the agenda needs to be posted starting in September for 48 hours in advance of the meeting. So what do we do if something comes up, after we post the agenda? Well, a couple things you could do would be to, update the agenda that's posted, right? Or maybe your agenda has some open-ended topics on it, like new business, old business, manager updates or something. You might be able to push it into one of those categories. But it would be best to have the agenda be as specific as possible. And I'm not saying that I'm opposed to talking about things in a meeting that aren't on the agenda, but I'm just saying be careful about that. One thing you have to be really careful about is if you're doing like an amendment to your documents and you add that to your agenda at the meeting. Well, there's a law that says if you're amending your bylaws, and the board's voting on it, or your other documents and the board's voting on it, that the homeowners should have notice of the amendment and, be aware that it's happening and they should be able to come to the meeting to hear more about it before the board votes on it. So if it's a change like that, you really shouldn't be doing that without having the agenda reflecting that. Okay, question 11. Does the new agenda law apply to just monthly board of directors meetings that the membership is invited to attend, or does it include financial committee that meets periodically and is open to the members? So great question. The agenda law specifically says board meetings. This question's kind of come up a couple of times. However, best practices would be if you are distributing an agenda for your financial meeting and it's a regularly scheduled meeting, or your architectural committee and it's a regularly scheduled meeting, it's an open meeting under the law. And so as best practices, I would also post an agenda for those committee meetings. Okay, question 12. Can the board move money from one line item to another without a formal meeting and a formal vote by board and notice to residents? This is kind of a general question. I mean, can they move money? I mean, I'm not sure what that means. So at times we do see on the budget that maybe, okay, so you have a certain pot of money that's coming in, right? Your income that's coming in. And maybe I think what you're trying to ask is, okay, let's say we budgeted $30,000 for electric and $10,000 for legal. And the electric is actually really only $15,000, right? And the legal is actually double what we thought it was going to be. Can the money that's coming in the pot of money, can it be, attributed to a different line item? So my answer would be yes. That happens all the time as we progress through the year. I'm hoping that I'm understanding your question. I mean, this obviously should be something that should be discussed by the treasurer each month in an open board meeting. And like for my association, the only things we talk about on the year-to-date budget are items that are over or under the budgeted amount and why. And that would be a great time to bring up, that we're over on this or we're under on this. And so therefore, there's been some realignment of the funds that are income. Next question, number 13. And that's just best practices, of course. There's no law that says they have to do that. Okay, question number 13. Can CC&Rs be amended to prohibit Section 8 housing? My opinion on that would be, okay, so Section 8 housing, just as a refresher, is like the low-income housing that's sponsored by, governmental agency. They supplement, the rent to allow low-income persons to live in a certain property. I would be very opposed to that because I don't think that would withstand a legal challenge. Question 14, what is the difference and why are there different regulations for HOAs and condos? Great question. So there is definitely a difference between HOAs and condominiums. Go to our cheat sheet called What is an Association? And we define, basically, it's who owns the common area is the short answer. So in a planned community, the association owns the common areas. In a condominium, each owner owns a percentage interest of the common areas. And so we have a great cheat sheet on that. So you can take a look at that. And why are there different laws for HOAs and condos? And that's a good question. I've been following Arizona legislature since 1995 when I started practicing law. And I can just say that the Condo Act was more extensive in terms of its length from the beginning when it started in 1986. And I don't know, there really isn't a rhyme or reason why some laws only apply to condos and not to planned communities. And, there's really good examples of this, like late fees. So if you are a condo, it just says that the association can charge late fees, but it doesn't give a limitation. If you're a planned community, we can charge late fees, but it can't be more than 10% of the assessment or $15, and we can charge it on 15th of each month. So I don't know why. I think it's because if you watch how legislation is made, it's sometimes not the prettiest. And so there's all kinds of concessions that are made to get bills passed, et cetera. And over time, I think we've gotten to the point that there are more planned communities and condominiums, and maybe the Planned Communities Act hasn't kept up, frankly, with the length of the Condominium Act. So I don't know if that's the good answer, but that's the messy answer. That's the messy truth. Okay, question number 15. Our small community HOA posted a sign saying all dogs need to be on a leash. After I notified the HOA of my service animals need to complete off-leash tasks. Oh, so they put the sign up after you told them you need a service animal, and you don't always have the service animal on a leash when they're doing tasks for you. This sign led to multiple incidents of harassment from a renter in our community, I'm assuming saying, "Why is your dog not on a leash?" and actions from the HOA president, including contacting animal control against my service animal. My service animal is always under the control of my verbal or hand gesture commands and has not had any incidents showing otherwise. Animal control informed me that all future calls against my service animal would be dismissed and that I did not violate any laws. However, it's been 2 months and the sign is still up. Our CC&Rs only state no pets loose on the property, and I have requested for months for the sign to be rewritten to properly reflect CC&Rs, stating no pets off leash instead of all dogs. Is there an authority that can be cited to hopefully bring a change to the sign and avoid further harassment? Well, I don't know what kind of service animal you have, so that would be helpful for me to understand that better to answer this question. But let's say it's like a sight dog or a hearing dog, or I think those are some good examples. Typically, those are not on a leash, and the association should not force you to put that dog on a leash if the dog needs to be off leash to take your tasks or to do your tasks. Other dogs, like emotional support pets, those typically are on a leash. And so, in my opinion, they probably could require you to have them on a leash unless you could show that there were some special circumstances that you need the emotional support pet to be off leash. In terms of the sign, I guess I wouldn't get too fixated on that. They shouldn't be enforcing it against you if your service animal is the type of animal that shouldn't be on a leash. And you have legal rights under the Fair Housing Act. If they continue to pursue that, you can go to the Attorney General's office to file a complaint. But the sign, I guess it could be, you could force them to change it to all non-service animals must be on a leash or something like that. It would be nice if everybody could work together on this and just make it a win-win. I do think the board should evaluate the language on this just because they don't want to get sued, have an attorney general complaint against them. Smart thing for them to do would just be to update the sign. But can the AG's office force them to do that? I'm not sure. Maybe, but maybe not too. Because, all dogs other than service animals, you have an exemption under the Fair Housing Act typically to this. So I don't know if they're going to make them reword it. They might not. Okay, question 16. Once an agenda is posted, can it be changed after 48 hours notice is provided? I talked about this a few questions ago. I think it can be, as long as you, resend out the new agenda, if you have time. If not, you might be able to push the topic into like president's report or treasurer's report, manager's report. But if it's one of those special circumstances where the owners really do need to have notice under the law, like if you're amending the bylaws, there's a special requirement for that. You should either push that to the next meeting where you can have proper 48 hours notice of the agenda, or, send out a revised, agenda. If somebody's going to question it, follow it by the book and, either change the meeting date or renotice with the new agenda and give 48 hours notice, or push it to the next board meeting. Okay, question 17. What is the law and the best way to deal with new owners' one-time reserve contribution? Can it be done, and what is the suggested amount? So we have a great cheat sheet on this topic called transfer fees versus disclosure fees. Also, you can take a look at Arizona revised statutes if you're a condo 33-1260, or if you're a planned community 33-1806. Also, there's another special law too that applies to this. I think it's 439, 33-439. It's on our cheat sheet. You can take a look at it. It needs to be in your CC&Rs. It has to have very specific language to comply with the state statute on this. And check our cheat sheet out to get the specifics on, how to do it. But it needs to be in your CC&Rs. It's not just something you can start charging, and it has to touch and concern the land. It has to be going to the association. There's all kinds of specific language in the law, so make sure you check that out. Question 18, who gets to keep the transfer fee and who gets to keep the disclosure fee? Well, typically the transfer fee is going to go to the association, unless it's in the documents that it goes to a third party, but it usually is never. That's usually not the case. So the transfer fee or capital contribution fee typically will go to the association, unless possibly, there's something in the management company that talks about this going to the management company. The disclosure fee, and I'm not sure that's enforceable. I'd have to look at your documents and see what the contract says, because the statute says that, anytime you have a transfer fee or capital contribution fee, it needs to go to the association. What about the disclosure fee? Usually that's negotiated as part of the management contract, and more likely than not, the management company takes that disclosure fee. Question 19, is an agenda needed for each board meeting or only the annual meeting? So this is the new law. Actually, let's back this up a little bit. You should have an agenda for every board meeting and for your annual meeting. The new law says starting mid-September, you have to send out an agenda 48 hours in advance of the board meeting. Okay. It's not 48 hours in advance of the annual meeting. It's the board meeting. And you have to hand out an agenda by law at every board meeting too, in addition to doing the notice. Best practices would be to have an agenda, sent out with your annual meeting notice, and also to have an agenda at the annual meeting. But it's not required under the law to have that. Question 20, is the new law regarding CC&Rs regulating parking on public streets in effect? I was under the impression it is on hold pending legal action. So great question. So if you look at our cheat sheet from 2023, we talk about a law that was passed. It applies to planned communities who have streets that are owned by the city, municipality, or dedicated to the public use. And it talks about the need to have a vote of the membership, in order to maintain the association's ability to regulate on-street parking. So you had a question. Your question is that law on hold pending legal action? It's not on hold. It's still the law. There were some bills introduced this year that could have potentially changed that law, but it did not change the law. And so take a look at our cheat sheet from 2023 and look at the specific requirements. You probably will have to have a vote of the membership to retain the ability to regulate the streets that are dedicated to the city before a date certain in 2020. I think it's 2026. Could be wrong, but it's on the cheat sheet. So it's I believe it's 2026. Okay, next question. Our CC&Rs require a 75% approval from all residents to change. When we can only get 55% who vote in elections, how can we ever change the CC&Rs? I agree, it's going to be difficult. One thing you might want to do is amend the amendment section. Try to get the 75% just to amend just that section to lower it to 51%. If you're a planned community, or 67%, which is the lowest you can go for a condo. If you follow our 5-step plan and you reach out to me as legal counsel, what I can tell you is we can help you get there. We've helped associations get 90% approval. It's just, you have to be very disciplined, and there is a procedure that you will want to follow when you're trying to collect ballots to get maximum participation. So it's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. Question number 22, our CC&Rs are so old and the copies are so bad, they are practically illegible. How can we get them reprinted in a more modern, legible way without having to retype the entire document? Unfortunately, really the only way to do that is to retype it, and make sure if you do that, that you type it exactly the same way that it was, on the illegible copy. If you can't read it, we're pretty skilled at getting documents from the recorder's office and retyping it for you so that every section you can read and is in a nice format for your owners. Reach out to us if you need help with that. Question 23, if you change your CC&Rs, are owners grandfathered into the old CC&Rs? Really, that just depends on how you amend your CC&Rs. Do you grandfather them in the language of the amendment or not? So it's really all this depends on how the amendments are written. Question number 24, should the board discussion to terminate our property management contract take place at an open meeting or an executive meeting? So good question, kind of a loaded question. So if you're talking about a vendor under the open meeting law, you can talk about their job performance in an executive session meeting. But when you fire them, it needs to be done in an open session. Same thing with hiring someone, open session. So you can talk about job performance in the executive session, but when you go to the firing step, that needs to be done in an open meeting. Number 25, what is a good benchmark for reserve funding? Look at your reserve study for your association. They give you, how much you should have in there. There is no rule of thumb like 3 times your operating expenses should be your reserve. That is not a good rule of thumb at all. You should go with a professional management company who's accredited to help you determine how much money you need in there. Okay, question 26 looks like we have about 8 more questions. If you just need to make your architectural CC&Rs clearer for the homeowners, do you need to have a vote to make the changes? It really depends. If it depends on what the section says about architectural changes. Maybe you could institute architectural guidelines to clarify it, or maybe you will need to do an amendment to your CC&Rs. You probably need to reach out to your attorney to discuss that. Question 27, you've previously answered the question about renters not attending and participating in association meetings without written permission from the owner. Do rules regarding flying flags or posting election signs apply to renters? So yes, the renter has the same, restrictions under the documents and under state law that any owner would have if they're occupying the property. Okay, question 28. Is there a percentage limit to yearly budget increases? You'd really have to check your CC&Rs to see how much, your assessments can be raised without a vote of the membership to determine the answer to that question. Question 29. If we have to transfer funds out of the reserve fund back into operating budget to cover deficits, are these transferred funds now taxable? So great question. Ask your CPA that. I'm not a CPA, so I don't know the answer to that, or whoever prepares your taxes. That's a great question for them. Question 30, 4 more questions. Since reaching a 75% yes vote to amend our CC&Rs is very hard, how long can we keep the vote open? I would say for as long as you want. I wouldn't keep it open for more than a year, though. Question number 31. We need a little more understanding of a non-owner attending a board meeting. Okay, great question. So under the open meeting law, any owner is allowed to attend, listen, and participate during a board meeting. If the owner doesn't want to attend or wants somebody to attend in their place or wants somebody to attend with them and they want that person to talk on their behalf, the owner needs to make that person their designated agent in writing and give that piece of paper to the board or the email to the board saying this person's my designated agent, and then they can attend. So if a non-owner wants to attend a board meeting, either the board allows it and doesn't mind, that's one way to get in, or the owner makes that person in writing their designated agent and then they can attend. Okay. Question 32, last 3 questions. Our HOA does not have a newsletter or a website and never lets homeowners know when the board meetings are. Only info we get are the dues notice in December and the annual meeting notice. Owners are pretty much in the dark on everything. So that's usually not a recipe for success. So the more you communicate as a board and the more information you provide and the more transparency that you have, obviously, the happier your homeowners are going to be because information is readily accessible to them. And owners have a right to attend these meetings. So they need to comply with the notice requirements, providing notice of the board meetings and providing, in mid-September, providing a copy of the agenda before every board meeting, or they are in violation of the law. Question 33. I hear terminology HOA, planned community, and condominium. Please clarify the distinction. Okay, so HOAs and planned communities also are known as PUDs. That is going to be kind of the slangs for those. That's one category. So a planned community is kind of also known as an HOA and also known as a PUD. And the legal distinction is that the association owns the common areas. If you are a condo, really they only call it condos, typically, or condominium. That's where each of the owners owns a percentage interest. Great cheat sheet on this called What is an Association? You may want to take a look at it if you want more information on that. Question number 34. Our HOA is grandfathered on the street parking regulation. We voted, approved, and recorded the document. Do we lose that privilege to regulate streets if we change the CC&Rs? Okay, so I think maybe you're kind of operating under maybe you weren't aware of the changes in the law last year. So basically, prior to last year, there was some question in our industry about, can we still regulate on-street parking if we do an amendment to our CC&Rs? The answer came last year in the form of legislation saying if you're a planned community and your streets are dedicated to the public, if you want to keep your ability to regulate the street parking, you have to take a vote of the membership. So look at our cheat sheet from 2023 and take a peek at that and look at what that law says. If you want to keep it, you have to take that affirmative action if you're one of those planned communities that falls under that category. Question 35, last two questions. I am new to the HOA board. How can I get the existing board members to be on the same page in regards to dealing with spending on projects? If I had a penny for every time this question with the same, basic general thought process on this is, I would probably be a millionaire now. It's a very common question. So, I guess here's the deal. When you get elected to your board, it's hard because, many of the board members have already been there and they already have a path and a pattern and they have the way that they've been operating for a long time. And so how do you get them to be on the same page as you? Well, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes you come into a board and everybody respects your opinion and they agree with you and honky-dory. Other times you maybe are elected and maybe you're considered like somebody that is, critical of the board, or you're considered, somebody who, is a defector or a detractor or whatever, not supportive of the community or not supportive of the prior board. They may be less receptive to hearing your feedback if you're in that situation, if you're a gadfly. And so what I would do is if you're in that situation, be nice, right? Be professional in how you give your feedback. And if you don't agree with how the board is doing something, professionally state that. If you think they're making a really wrong turn, maybe you need to put it in writing. Hey, I disagree with this and here's why. That's really all you can do. It's majority vote rules on a board. And I hate to say this, but another option would be, to go to the Arizona Department of Real Estate if you think the board is doing something improperly, or a lawsuit. I don't want that for you because that's very expensive for everybody and it's not a good situation. So try to work together. One little tidbit I'll tell you is when I was on my board and then I got off my board when I had a decade of, having kids, and I took a 10-year break and now I'm back on my board again since 2016. What I can tell you is when I got back on my board in 2016, I was the gadfly. I was unhappy about how things were running in our community. And it took a while for the board to warm up to me. But I will say that I was professional. I was polite. I, tried to be a good board member. Even though I didn't always agree with how things were being handled, I was professional in how I documented my concerns. And eventually the board changed and then I got a majority. So it's think long game. Things don't change overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. You just have to be patient and use some of the strategies that I've given you here today and recognize we've all been there. I had the exact situation. I had maybe a year and a half to almost 2 years where I was banging my head against a concrete wall, where I just didn't like the direction our board was taking, but I managed my way through it. And now I think things are going really well. Last question of today. I was told by the board that Arizona state law said the annual raise to the HOA can go up 25% each year. Sounds excessive. So I think what you're asking is how much can the board increase the assessments without a vote of membership? Now, a couple things you want to look at. What do your documents state? Right? If you're a condominium, that's going to be what's controlling. How can you increase the assessment rate? Do you need a vote of the membership? Can the board do it? What's the percentage? If you're a planned community, you also want to look at what your documents state. And let's say that your documents say nothing about increasing assessments. Well, then there's a state law that says you can't increase it more than 20% of the prior year's assessment without a vote of the membership. And so the 25% each year doesn't, that's not exactly right. What it says is that if your documents are silent on how much the board can raise the assessment, which is very rare, most documents cover this, and you're a planned community, then you flip over to the state law and it says, you can raise up to 20% of the prior year's assessment without a vote of the membership. So that's it for today. We got through a lot. Gosh, 12:38, hour and 38 minutes. We covered 36 questions. Our firm's next live virtual First Friday event is going to take place on Friday, August 2nd at 9 a.m. That's your chance to log into Zoom or Facebook Live and ask a question. And I provide a live answer right then and there. So please consider joining us for that. Our next virtual HOA Academy, HOA Condo Academy, will be class number 8 in August. And that will take place on the third Tuesday of the month, like it always does, which is Tuesday, August 20th at 11 a.m. And the topic is going to be, what is a community association? Which we had a lot of questions on that today. Like, what's a planned community? What's a condominium? How does this all work together? How does it operate? And secrets of successful associations, which you really want to tune in on, because the goal of serving on your board is to get things done, to accomplish things, to limit conflict, to make improvements to your community. And so we're going to tell you what's the secret sauce to make your association successful. And we have 25 years experience plus. And I can tell you the boards that are successful, what they do. So it's almost like a little board improvement, self-improvements for board seminar. Hope you'll tune in for that next month. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Really appreciate you being here. You can sign up for any of our classes or First Friday or our neighborhood services, HOA Academy, via our website at mulcahylawfirm.com. Lastly, and most importantly, we want your feedback. So if you wouldn't mind, we genuinely and sincerely appreciate it if you'd give our firm a review on Google or on Yelp. We're going to be sharing a link in the chat on how to leave a review. We're always happy to get feedback from our valued participants and from our clients about how we're doing. If you like these classes, it's really important for us to get feedback so that we can then provide them to the neighborhood services departments. And this is the best way to do it. So if you wouldn't mind doing that for us, I would be grateful, so that then we can provide that feedback back to the neighborhood services departments so that they know that these classes are valuable and we should continue them going forward. Hope everybody's having a great summer, and I look forward to seeing everybody again in August. Take care.